John is also coming to us electronically and via satellite, so thanks a lot.
Great. Well, John Jackson, my friend, has really an impressive resume. Before joining the Schott Foundation as president, he served on the president's transition team in 2008 and in the Clinton administration as a senior policy advisor for civil rights. And he was the national director of education for the NAACP. I have worked with John for 6 years now, and what is most impressive is his commitment to doing the right thing regardless of the opposition. Martin Luther King once said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. What is clear is people like John and organizations like Schott are the arc benders. We are blessed to have people like John who have led organizations and supported movements committed to bending the arc towards justice. He has steadfastly pursued finance equity and high-quality early learning for young children, and he has highlighted the challenge of educating boys of color. I really look forward to hearing what he has to teach me this evening. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I just want to thank Fred for that introduction, and many of us who know Fred know that Fred doesn't say a lot, but when he talks, he's a quiet storm. He always says something that's very substantive. So those words mean a lot to me, Fred, in your introduction, and I thank you for your work and thank you for your friendship. I also want to thank you all for investing your time to pull together this collaboration. Definitely my philanthropic partners at Chicago Community Trust, Karen, Barbara. This is something that is very personal to me in that I grew up on the south side of Chicago, attended Frank L. Gillespie Elementary School, went to Kenwood for a day, got in a little trouble, ended up graduating from Creekmont High School. We won't talk about the trouble, though, but I did finish. And so it's very personal because for me, education has been a vehicle to opportunity. And I'm quite aware that while I may have been given the opportunity to achieve some things because of my education, there are still thousands of young people in cities in Chicago, like Chicago, across the country, who, if we just find a way to create a pipeline to provide them all a fair and substantive opportunity to learn, we can achieve greater outcomes, not only for them, but for our communities and for humanity. And ultimately, as I see it, that is our goal. So often when I have these conversations, I don't shy away from being deliberately redundant in that when I used to teach at Georgetown, I would remind my students on the first day of class that there's clear evidence that indicates that we're 99.6% the same. In fact, there are more genes to explain the variance in our eye color than our racial or ethnic differences. We're 99.6% the same. So to the degree that we see any educational outcomes or variances that are identifiable by race, gender, social policies, and social practices which lead to these differences. And our challenge here, your challenge with Generation All, is to identify what are the policies and practices in Chicago that allow us to identify by race, by ethnicity, who's more likely to graduate, who's more likely to be placed in special education, who's less likely to have the resources necessary to have an opportunity to learn, who's less likely to be in the gifted and talented course. Identify those policies and practices and address them. Because fundamentally, we can look at this launch as a part of another programmatic launch, but I'll say this, that programs are progress, but ultimately, if we want to change the system, it's about institutionalizing that which works in a programmatic model into the system. So programs are progress, but policy is power. And while we have great opportunities in Chicago and great challenges, I am one who believes, and my faith teaches me, that we're never giving a problem without also having the people in the presence who can address that problem. And that's why I feel confident with the thought leadership and the action leadership coming from the community trust, coming from CTU and CPS, and coming from the young people of Chicago. We have everything that we need to take on the challenge. So to me, as I think about this launch, the major question in my mind and in my head is, what is the tangible promise that you seek to guarantee all in this and the next generation? What is the tangible promise? So at a macro level, I'm sure we can say, well, we want to get every child career and college and career ready. But we are dealing with a different generation and my daughter often reminds me that sometimes she needs to see things a little more tangible. Meaning if I came to her with a promise, I'm going to promise you fun and I'm going to promise you today happiness. Daddy, what does that mean? She wants to know, are you promising to take me to get ice cream? Are you promising to take me to the amusement park? Likewise, I think that we have to, as we launch these initiatives, we have to begin to speak to what are the tangible promises. If the tangible promise for Generation All is that every child in the city of Chicago will attend college, and I'm not saying that that's the promise, then that we should track and hold ourselves accountable and hold every partner at the table for meeting what's necessary in order to keep that promise. If the promise is around making individuals career ready, well, it seems to me that the metric for that is the placement of individuals in careers where they can earn a livable wage. So very clear and at the front part of the initiative is identifying what is the tangible promise. Once we identify the tangible promise, I would submit that it's very important that we don't oversell or undersell what we can do or what we're trying to do. Don't oversell in the sense that for far too long we have been saying that we have been selling that educators and schools can do it on their own. When you think about it, we often talk about education as a vehicle to success, and yes, that is very true in many respects. But what schools and what educators have been challenged to take on in many communities across the country is to be the best anti-poverty vehicle that city or that state may have. And I just hope that as we think about what our promise is, that we don't oversell. We can't say that schools and educators are going to do it alone. And I think you all recognize that because of some of the partners that are at the table. But I point this out because we've got to recognize and begin to identify now who are the other players that are not currently at the table that need to be at the table if we are truly going to make this promise happen. And don't undersell in the sense of for far too long, we have been minimizing the impact of engaging young people, parents, and communities at the table as we talk about how to create these pipelines for opportunity. And they are as essential as many of the other conversations that we have around pedagogy, around standards, around accountability, the importance of community engagement, the importance of community activism is as essential as those other things. And we undersell them often because our institutions, our systems are not able to engage them. But in my mind, that is the brilliance of partnership. I would submit that if any of the partners recognize that as a part of your contribution, you're not able to bring parents to the table, you're not able to bring the active students to the table, that's not your contribution. And that only speaks to the need to bring others to the table who can make that contribution. So I would hope that individually and collectively, we don't over or undersell what we are doing. Because essentially, as I talk about providing students a fair and substantive opportunity to learn, quite frankly, what we are attempting to do goes beyond just education. And if we are going to see the types of educational outcomes that we desire to see, there has to be a larger frame. And in many respects, what we are looking at doing is looking at creating healthy living and learning climates for students, creating healthy living and learning climates as a vehicle to provide all students a fair and substantive opportunity to learn. The climate, the community as a vehicle to provide all students a fair and substantive opportunity to learn. And this is a shift. It's a shift in how, at the federal level, the conversations have been moving forth and the policies have been moving forth and the grant funding and many. This doesn't say that Common Core standards is enough. We won't achieve the goal of healthy living and learning climates by just meeting the goals in Common Core standards. But what it says is, to the degree that we know that we need Common Core standards, we are going to also ensure that we have Common Core supports for all students to meet those Common Core standards. We're going to ensure that we have what's necessary to wrap the students with the necessary supports that they need to be successful. And we know that those supports go beyond just academic. Some of them are academic supports. We can talk about the importance of extended day learning. We can talk about the importance of tutoring, summer learning, additional ELL supports. Those are all academic pieces that, as we think through this, we have to think through how do we increase the resources that are available to students in those buckets. But we also have to recognize that there is a social emotional bucket that we also have to begin to develop the types of partnerships so that we can provide the types of personal opportunity plans for students that will meet not only their academic but their socio-emotional needs. We know now in philanthropy and other spaces that having a mentor actually works. And often year after year we have individuals and organizations who mentor as a part of their volunteer operations. I think that's good. But if we know that it's something that's significant that leads to a level of success that we desire to institutionalize, that in and of itself has to be institutionalized, not from just a volunteer base, but institutionalized in our budgets, institutionalized in how we resource them. And I know, there may be some that say, well, how do we get these resources? The state is strapped, the city is strapped. Like I said, to do what we are attempting to do, it is going to require a shift. We can't do business as usual, but there are a series of shifts that are going to have to occur. So if you look at how we resource things, we might say that we don't have resources to pay mentors out of the state and local budget, but yet we pay for probationary officers out of those same budgets. And often our young people are directed through this process to places where it costs us more to keep them. I just hope as a part of the promise that we are securing for all within this generation and all within the next generation in Chicago, that we also begin to secure the resources and make the necessary shift to not only meet their academic, their socio-emotional, and finally their health challenges. We know that we can identify the health barriers which serve as challenges to a student's opportunity to learn. Asthma, eyesight. All of this has to be a part of the partnerships and the agencies that we pull together in order to put a cadre of supports around students so that they can have a fair and substantive opportunity to learn, and so that we can secure their promise. Doing this, I repeat, is going to take more than just tracking the education outcomes. I do believe that as you launch it, there are a core set of education outcomes that you want to follow. But there are also a core set of family and community outcomes that should be tracked also. And those are the health outcomes. Those are the safety outcomes. Because just getting our young people through school year after year is not enough if we can't guarantee that they feel that they live in an ecosystem or a climate that is safe enough to thrive. I would think that even the students who attend Urban Prep Academy there in Chicago still would highlight the need for us to create climates that are very safe. So we want to have our education outcomes, our family and community outcomes, and third, I think that there needs to be a level of civic engagement outcomes. Because if we don't have communities that are civically engaged in not only helping to shape the promises, the policies and practices, but also engage in the political process, we don't have the necessary buy-in that will achieve the level of sustainability necessary. And we should not forget this. A clear reminder of the need to ensure a level of civic engagement in order to have a healthy living and learning climate is Ferguson. Ferguson, a city that was 65% African American, yet in the 2012 election, you had a voter turnout of only 7%. Ferguson, majority black city where you did not have a black on city council, no black police chief, no black superintendent. It just creates a level of challenge and a level of division that doesn't allow us to achieve the promise that's necessary. So let's ensure that our indicators have education outcomes, family and community outcomes, which under that bucket I would put health and safety outcomes, but also civic engagement outcomes. Because our schools, yes, can be used as the platform to create the climate. Our goal is to try to use our schools as the only mandatory institutions in many communities as the platform to create the climate to provide all students a fair and substantive opportunity to learn. So once we agree on what the promise is, once we agree that what we are trying to do is larger than just impacting students educationally, it's very important early on that each organization understands its role in fulfilling the promise. President Kennedy, when he announced that the country would go to the moon, he laid out a mission, a goal, a promise. Now, for a janitor who worked at NASA, ensuring that the laboratories were clean was that janitor's contribution to President Kennedy's promise. So the question that we have to ask for each organization, what is your contribution to the overall promise that Generation All will lay down as a part of this launch? Because it has to be clear each organization's contribution. And again, I want to remind us, in articulating that contribution, let's not oversell and let's not undersell. Oversell from a perspective of claiming to be able to contribute something that you have no capacity to contribute. Undersell from a perspective of not recognizing the complex contributions that are going to be needed in order to achieve the goal. When President Kennedy announced that the country would go to the moon, they needed to create over 65,000 new products to get there. New products. I mean, these were things that when they announced that they were going to the moon and they sat down and they announced the launch of this goal, they did not know they would need to create. So I would hope that we would maintain some flexibility by, yes, number one, starting with identifying the contributions of each and every organization at the table, but also being flexible and innovative enough to begin to think through what needs to be created in order and what new partnerships need to be developed in order to secure the promise. This point right here really points us to the fact that what we are talking about will take time. And when I say take time, time is neutral. It could be used for good or bad. And Dr. King said it best when he said, to the degree that we're not using it for good, it becomes an ally for evil. But I hope that we don't do something that we often do when we launch programs, we launch initiatives, we say, this is a 5-year partnership, this is a 2-year partnership. Anything under 10 or 15 years or less is not substantive enough as far as time in order to see the types of commitment that's necessary to succeed. And hear me right, I'm not saying that we have to wait 10 or 15 years to see progress, because we can't wait that long. Quite frankly, we just don't have that long. But what I am saying is each organization and each entity should prepare their organization and institution in such a way where they can remain committed to this partnership for a 10 to 15 year or more time period. But I do think it's very important that we are clear about the time that we're going to commit to ensuring the success and institutionalization of this initiative. So my final piece is related to the fact that once we have been clear about the promise, and once we are clear about those partners that are going to be at the table, our collective contributions as organizations, the time period in which we are going to make these commitments. And some might say, well, we're going to make it in perpetuity until we achieve our goal of 100%. I hope that once we have done all these things, we will give this Generation All initiative what I would call a going to the moon type of prioritization. And I call it a going to the moon type of prioritization because we cannot allow our conflicts on other issues to disrupt our agreement and collaboration on this issue. Case in point, right now, and there have been times through history that the U.S. has been at odds with Russia. Yet we have still been in collaboration even during each of those periods with Russia on our outer space and our NASA missions. We have to give this Generation All collaboration that level of prioritization. We may disagree on some of the we may not agree on issue to student assignment, and we should fight those battles. But we also have to recognize that this collaboration and prioritize this collaboration above those individual battles. Because one thing is clear, is if we're not able to come together to create a healthy living and learning climate for all students, any debate around charters, neighborhood assignments, resourcing becomes moot debate. Because we would not have created the ecosystem that even with those individual components, the students will be successful. So I would hope that we would provide a higher level of prioritization to the generational initiative. And, finally, as we've talked about what we are going to do collectively, what we are going to do in collaboration, what we are going to do as organizations, there is a part of this that requires each of us as individuals to answer our calling. And each of us has a call within this collaboration, and there is a reason why, as an individual, you sit at that table. And no one else can tell you what that calling, your individual calling is. The only thing that I would encourage us to do is not to expect that the role that we play in this collaboration will always put our names in lights, have our names in lights, always have our names in the paper, or if it is in the paper, it won't always be in the paper for the reasons that you would like to see it in the paper. The point here is it's going to take a level of sacrifice and a level of commitment. The work that we do and the work that you are setting out to do as a part of launch is not a task, but it is an assignment. A task is something where you can write down, you can predict how much time it will take, you can predict how much it will cost. This is not a task. This is an assignment where we are not able to predict. You're not able to predict the time. The only thing that you're able to predict and commit is to the cause and to securing the promise. And, as the final note, it takes what a little boy had to teach his father. And it's a story that I like to tell because I think the story highlights best. And as the father completed the story, the little boy said, "Daddy, can you bring me a glass of water?" His father said, "Son, I cannot bring you water. It's your bedtime. I'm not giving you water before you go to bed. You had all day to get water. Good night, son." As the father began to get up and walk away, he hears his son again say, "Daddy, can you bring me a glass of water?" Father, a little more upset, said, "Son, I just explained to you I'm not bringing you water before you go to bed. I explained that to you. If I have to come back in here, I'm going to have to come back in here to spank you. Good night." Father gets up, walks out the door, closes the door, and hears his son, "Daddy, when you come back in here to spank me, can you bring me a glass of water?" The point there and the point here is it's going to take a level of persistence in order to achieve that we are setting out to achieve and securing the promise, not just for a few in this generation, not just for a few in the next generation, but for securing a promise for this generation and the next generation, a promise for all. And at the Schott Foundation, as an organization and as an individual, I am committed to that cause. We are committed to that cause, and we look forward to working with you all in partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, John, so much. Hi, my name is Laura McAlpine. I'm one of the facilitators for tonight. Can you applaud that again? That was so great. I wrote down so many things on my paper. I hope you all did too. We want to give you guys a break because you've heard so many things. And after the break, we're going to give you the chance to try and digest all the different conversations you've started to hear tonight.